ゲーム機とソフトいくらくらいする？
中古市場なら合わせて4000円するかしないかですね。でもなぜ？
佐藤、すまん、手が滑っている。
現在進行形。僕のサターン！僕のサターン！
The world has changed, and we are at the dawn of a new age in anime, an age of Sega. Gone are the days of watching Rama playing the Super Famicom or seeing some dude's mom buying and selling on the stock market through a Nintendo Famicom on laughing salesmen. These have now been updated and replaced with the likes of the PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and mobile gaming. But it also paved the way for something new, the concept of a character that loves retro gaming. And when it comes to retro gaming, the anime industry has a clear preference for Sega. Yes, whether it's the Master System, Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, the Game Gear, or heck, even the elusive SG-1000, one thing has been made abundantly clear. Never has Sega gotten so much love from the anime industry as it has in the past few years. In fact, whenever a character is shown to be into retro gaming, Sega's representation far outpaces that of Sony, Nintendo, or any other popular system or gaming company in Japan combined. As an avid anime watcher, I can count on one hand the times I've seen a Famicom or Super Famicom in a modern Japanese anime. But the amount of times I've seen classic Sega being shown with fondness and loving nostalgia from both the writers and animator teams has exploded over the past few years. And these aren't just one-off blink and you'll miss it cameos either. Some shows, like in Over the Moon for You, will have the characters spark pretty lengthy Sega discussions, while others like Sega Hard Girls, Isekai Ojisan, and High Score Girl make Sega an integral part of the plot.
まさか今日、大野さんとの対戦が実現できるなんて。遊びで来る？それとも。
よし戦輪からの効果状態にコンボの追い打ちからの白骨登場だ。
But it still begs the question, why is Sega getting more representation than its competition combined? One of the arguments I've heard is that Sega owns anime studios, so it's likely that they will take any chance they can to insert their classic systems and games into their shows. And while at first this seems like a compelling argument, upon closer investigation I discovered that out of all the anime shows we'll be taking a look at today, only one of them was made by Sega, and that was Sega Hard Girls, an anime whose main characters are anthropomorphized versions of the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, and Sega Dreamcast, so yeah, you didn't really need Wikipedia to figure out that Sega had a hand in that one. But regardless, this also shows that there is no Sega mandate to include their classic games and consoles in their anime. Another argument I've heard is that unlike Sony or Nintendo, you are more unlikely to be sued by Sega for mentioning their games and systems. And while that might be true for Sega of America and Europe, this is Sega of Japan we're talking about, and they're just as trigger happy to taking Simon to court as Nintendo is. And in fact, Sega of Japan issued copyright complaints at High Score Girl, an anime starring a group of kids in the early to mid-90s who love arcade games and whose main character Haruo is a passionate Sega fanboy who loves his Sega Saturn. And it even features the rare Sega Game Gear representation, complete with the Game Gear ports of Fatal Fury Special, Samurai Showdown, Puyo Puyo, Space Harrier, and Mortal Kombat.
今モータルコンバット真剣降臨伝説やってますでしょ。音でわかります。
So it's pretty clear that all this representation does not come from Sega being more permissive than its Nintendo or Sony counterparts. No, my only guess is that Sega has now become the face of retro gaming in Japan. Maybe the people who bought Famicoms and Super Famicoms were more casually into gaming, whereas Sega fans were more hardcore and were therefore more likely to grow up and work in the anime and gaming industries. Or perhaps there was simply a resurgence of Sega's gaming past in Japan. Either way, it's still interesting to see that Sega has been receiving far more representation in modern anime than either Sony or Nintendo, but also far and away outpacing other retro systems that, while mostly unknown in the West, were very popular in Japan. Systems like the PC-88, PC-98, and the MSX. All we know for certain is that when it comes to retro gaming, Sega has now become the absolute dominant force in modern anime. But what is modern anime? Where do we draw the line on what modern is? And how can I be sure that Sega has got more representation than its Nintendo or Sony counterparts? Well, let's establish some rules then. We'll use a nice round number and say that any show launched from 2010 onwards will be considered modern. So this means we have 12 years of anime to sift through and scour for any and all references to consoles like the Master System, the Famicom, the Mega Drive, the PS1, Sega Saturn, or the Game Boy. But wait, I hear you ask, Stika, surely you didn't just watch every anime to have ever come out for the past 12 years, right? Oh ye of little faith, I am in fact not your garden variety weeb. No, I am what's known as a Portuguese weeaboo. And we Portuguese weeps, we are a rare breed, we're just built different. For example, a regular weeb would post their dream waifus on all them Reddit chants. But on the other hand, a Portuguese weeb creates a literal Lord of the Rings style novel which is then published by a legitimate book publishing company in which Dracula from Castlevania and artists from Warcraft 3 team up to conquer Europe, and where the author is both the main character and the hero of the story. But also, he's the son of Odin, who team ups with Kenshi from Mortal Kombat to put a stop to the evil plans of Dracula from Castlevania and artists from Warcraft. And also, along the way, our hero meets his ideal girlfriend, a Japanese kunoichi ninja who he meets in Lisbon, Portugal, during the 19th century. Fucking hell man, weebs are so cringe. And also, your Japanese girlfriend ninja is a minor, or at the very least, of questionable age, because... of course she is. And also, there are lewd scenes with said Japanese kunoichi ninja of questionable age, because... of course there are. And not only do you somehow manage to avoid getting your legal ass collectively handed to you in court by the Konami Midway Blizzard tech team, but your 7th grade level fanfiction creation is somehow successful enough that your Lord of the Rings style novel ends up being turned into a trilogy because the publisher wanted more sequels. Yes, this actually happened! So you see, we Portuguese weebs, we're not like you. We are not the same. Also, I simply went to SegaRetro.org's reference page, which already had most of the work already compiled for me anyway, so that saved me a ton of work. A big thank you to that site from Discord for helping me out on this. Anyway, being the massive weeb that I am, I have found classic Nintendo to be represented a total of 4 times. These are the 2nd season of the Gashi Kashi with their Super Mario World themed bubblegum,
こうやっておお本当に漫画になった
組み立て式なのがプラモデルっぽくてワクワク感があるわよね。
Danganronpa 3, in which characters play Mario Kart 64, Love Live Superstar Season 2, in which a character owns literally every console known to man, including an Atari Lynx, and the aforementioned High Score Girl, an anime that revolves entirely around retro gaming. And that's it! 4 anime in 12 years, 2 of which, Love Life and High Score Girl, were far more thorough with their Sega appreciation, with Love Life taking the time to give you close-up shots of the Sega Master System and Mega Drive, Mega CD and 32X combo. High Score Girl, on the other hand, the Famicom is featured and talked about several times, with our main character and certified based boy Haruo Yaguchi often treating Famicom-owning gamers like filthy and washed casuals. No, our boy Haruo has other gaming tastes in mind. He has refined tastes. For when it came the time to buy a 16-bit system, he chose the PC Engine. A gentleman's choice. And while that would not be my first choice, it is a pick that says, I may not have the exact same gaming taste that you do, but I am a refined person with an impeccable gaming taste.
わかっただろう PC エンジンは家をゲーセンに変えちまうすごいハードなんだこれがなかったらゲーセンで使う金は倍以上になってとっくに親に感動されてたぜだが PC エンジンの進撃はとどまることを知らねえ Q カードをそのまま使える世界初のカラー携帯ゲーム機もあるんだその名も PC エンジン GT
But when it came the time to own a 32-bit system, our boy Harwo here knew that the power of Sega was just too strong to resist and chose a Sega Saturn. For he knew that only then could he own the fine gaming experiences that only the power of two Hitachi CPUs could offer. One of his love interests, however, not wanting to be left behind, bought a Sony PlayStation, with none of the characters choosing a Nintendo 64, showing the world what we always knew to be true, that just like real life, main characters play on Saturn, side characters play on PlayStation, and no one would ever deign themselves to play on Nintendo 64. Haruo is truly a man after my own heart, and High Score Girl is truly the best anime of all time. And this is where all classic Nintendo representation comes to an end. Remember, we are not looking for your Wiis or Nintendo Switches. This is about classic Nintendo. Your Famicoms, Super Famicoms, Nintendo 64s, Game Boys, Game Boy Advances, and all that jazz. And in over a decade of anime, classic Nintendo was featured a measly 4 times. But what about Sony? Surely there has to be some PS1 representation over the last 12 years, right? And surprisingly, there's even less of it than there was for Nintendo. Once again, we have the aforementioned Love Life Superstar Season 2 with their Blink and You'll Miss It console collection pan. We also have the previously discussed High Score Girl and the excellent Call of the Night, an anime that launched only a few months ago and is still ongoing as I'm writing this, in which Koyamori, a 14-year-old boy who ditches school to enjoy Tokyo's nightlife, and his romantic interest, Nazuna Nanakusa, a literal vampire who's just having fun, are often seen playing on an original PlayStation with a special emphasis on Street Fighter Alpha 3. The weird thing is that the footage we see is that of the 30th anniversary collection on the PS4. And in fact, there's even a part where Ko turns off the console abruptly on Nazuna and she says that it's a good thing that these modern systems have autosave and that they're not playing on a retro system. So maybe this is a PS4 in a PS1 shell? I'm confused. But then again, this show also has a deal with Sony Musical Records, with their logo being prominently displayed in both the opening and closing themes. So maybe there's more than meets the eye to this one. But this is where the Sony representation ends, with a mere 3 anime shows, 2 of which are shared with Nintendo and Sega. But now comes the behemoth that is Sega in modern anime. And I counted a whopping 14 anime shows that featured classic Sega in some way, shape or form, only 3 of which are shared with other non-Sega retro consoles. Yes, that's twice as many as both Sony and Nintendo put together.
彼が二次元の世界から戻れるようサポートするとか洋服から生活用品から食べ物まで全部ネットショッピングで済ます日々から目を覚まさせてあげるとか Twitter でやたらと有名人に噛みつきに行くねじ曲がった根性を正してあげるとか
We've got everything, from multiple episodes of Squid Girl playing on a white Mega Drive, which is a thing that I never knew I desperately wanted until today, and we even get to see her play Virtua Fighter on the Sega 32X. Truly a Squid Girl after my own heart.
Oh, this is beautiful.
And also the reason why Squid Girl is the best anime of all time. But we also see characters playing Nights into Dreams on Durara, Virtua Fighter 1 on Yokai Watch, a character crying that her Game Gear was turned into a Sega Nomad, and honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. From Pop Team Epic parodying the Kusoge Saturn game Death Crimson, which led to a resurfacing of the game's popularity, to not one, not 2, but 3 anime shows where classic Sega is an instrumental part of the show's plot. These are, of course, Sega Hard Girls, an anime in which our 3 main characters are literally the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, and Sega Dreamcast, in which they jump from classic Sega game to classic Sega game, and along the way, they get to meet characters like Akira from Virtua Fighter, Ulala from Space Channel 5, Sonic the Hedgehog, and even the pervert known as Gilius Thunderbird from Golden Axe.
この子はとにかく音楽のセンスがずば抜けているということだ。だとすると歌でアピールしてくるかもしれませんね。さらにブラジルなど南米関係に強い。
Then we have the aforementioned high score girl yet again, in which our main characters love Capcom, SNK, and Sega fighting games, but also where our main character, Haruo, is a PC Engine and Sega Saturn fanboy true and true for their fast-paced arcade games. And then, of course, we have the currently ongoing Netflix anime Isekai Ojisan, or Uncle from Another World, in which our protagonist, the 34-year-old uncle, was in a coma and got transported to another world, where he was beaten, lynched, persecuted, and chased off dozens, if not hundreds of times, and after waking up from his 17-year coma and discovering that his family wants nothing to do with him, his first question is asking how the console war is doing and if Sega won.
国内だとソニーと任天堂が2強って感じかな。は？セガは？ねえ、それ今聞くこと。セガは？いや、とっくに撤退したけど。
And discovering that Sega lost the console war brought him so much pain and misery that he had to use literal magic to delete this information from his mind. A move reserved for only the darkest and most earth-shattering reveals that would break the mind of any man. Truly, Oji-san is a man of the people. He is all of us. Though that's not where the references to Sega end in Isekai Ojisan. Oh no, quite the contrary. From Alien Storm, Alien Soldier, Sonic the Hedgehog, Guardian Heroes, and Puyo Puyo, to the Mega Drive, the Sega Saturn, and even the freaking Game Gear TV tuner. I repeat, there's a Game Gear TV tuner reference in a modern 2022 anime. Isekai Ojisan has it all. Truly an uncle after my own heart. And also the reason why Isekai Ojisan is the best anime of all time. And what I find interesting about all of this is that most of these Sega references aren't just a Mega Drive or Sega Saturn tucked away in the background like with Love Live Superstar. They are at the forefront. They have literal anime-made serve you a Sega Master System on a platter, which I know sounds like a metaphor, but is actually not. They have characters hold the Sega console for all to see. They have the characters discuss their love of Sega for minutes on end, even when it doesn't serve the plot. They will reference weird and obscure Sega stuff. This is not a one-off thing. This is consistent enough, and there are enough recurring events to make it into a pattern. I mean, just look at Over the Moon for You, a 2018 romantic comedy anime in which our main heroine, Tsukasa Yuzaki, dropped everything to go live with the love of her life. Her sister, on the other hand, is against this arrangement and tries to bring her back, but Tsukasa has an ironclad argument as to why she can't return home. For you see, in this new home, they have a Sega Mega Drive, and that is enough to abandon your family. Truly, a woman after my own heart.
Oh, this is beautiful.
And this argument is so good and so strong that her sister instantly accepts it as valid. For she knows mere familial bonds are a trifle next to the power of Sega. But wait, this is not your garden variety sister. For she knows that the only way to defeat the power of Sega is with more Sega, which is why she also offers to buy a Sega Mega Drive, but also an Apple Pippin, a Laseractive, a Puta, a PC, and yet another Sega console, the SG-1000, effectively doubling the number of Sega consoles mentioned in this episode. Truly a woman after my own heart.
Oh, this is beautiful.
And also the reason why Over the Moon for You is the best anime ever made. And this offer of twice the Sega power is so good that it manages to convince some random Japanese woman to go live with her. For as everyone knows, no man, woman or child can resist the allure of Sega. You see dude, that's how you do it. And you don't even need to be the son of Odin to get a GF. We also have Season 2 of Jashin Chan Dropkick, also known as Dropkick on My Devil, in which our main cast are looking for one of the character sisters who's gone missing. But our main character, the lovable scamp that is the snake demoness Jashin Chan, chose instead to go to a video game store and buy a Sega Genesis as well as a copy of Capcom's Punisher, a mediocre Sega Genesis port of one of Capcom's best arcade brawlers. And when I say Sega Genesis, I mean Sega Genesis, because the Punisher never launched in Japan, and we can see that she's clearly holding an American copy of the game. Truly a snake demoness after my own heart.
Oh, this is beautiful.
And also why Jashin Chan Dropkick is the best anime of all time. These are just a few of the Sega references in modern anime. Honestly, if I kept going, I have no idea how long this video would end up being. And I feel it's gone on for long enough. If you want to see a full list of every Sega reference in both modern and classic anime, or just movies and TV shows in general, my advice is to check the references page in SegaRetro.org. But for my part, I'll just keep watching anime and hope that this is only the beginning of many more references to come. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Stika's Retro Corner. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And you can also support me on Patreon. It may not seem like it, but even $1 is a really big help in keeping this channel going. I would also like to thank my newest Patreon supporter, Liquid Farts. Damn, that's quite the name there. But more importantly, thank you for helping make the channel better. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!